hello again for a panel discussion around Gen AI. Whose future is it? Debating future directions for AI in the enterprise. Again, I'm Ren, and I would love to start with everyone introducing yourselves. And do you have a go-to karaoke song?
Don't stop me now. That's it. That's my cover.
That's your okay.
And you have to sing yours too.
Oh man, you don't want to have to listen to me. So.
And who are you, Florian?
I'm Michael Balint. So I work at NVIDIA. I'm a director. I focus on product architecture, so building new products at NVIDIA.
I'm Meryem. You just heard me ramble on for 10 minutes. I love a ballad, love Coldplay. So yeah, my reference was Coldplay, The Scientist. And if you get me drunk enough, I will sing it.
Okay, this is a challenge. I would say probably anything Madonna. Yeah, maybe some Spice Girls. Yeah. So I have some questions, but we will be opening up. So if you have questions, please jot them down, and we'll have time to ask those as well. I'm going to start with you, Meryem. When thinking about the marketplace of LLMs, it seems so easy to just simply use an API. But what are the considerations that organizations need to deal with in choosing to rather self-host? Why are people doing that?
So I think APIs are really, really fantastic. And if you can get away with your use case using them, I think it's, on the whole, a really good thing. Broadly, there's 3 reasons why our clients in particular would choose to self-host. So the first one is that security and privacy. So if you are not already an Azure client and you want to deploy something in your own VPC or in your even on-prem data center, like a lot of our European clients are on-prem still, then you don't really have another option but to self-host. So if you really need that total privacy and kind of control, then you have to self-host. The second reason, potentially counterintuitively, is performance. So the best of the best model, in general terms, is something like a Claude or something like a GPT-4. But when you're looking at domain-specific models, you can get better performance by self-hosting smaller and specialized models. And then the third reason why people choose to self-host is like scalability and cost at that scale. So when you're starting at a very, very small scale, using API-based models is much cheaper because you pay by the token. But when you start deploying it at mass enterprise scale, then that per token cost starts really, really adding up, and deploying a much smaller model in your own infrastructure can be much cheaper at scale. So that's privacy and control, performance, and then also that scalability and cost factor, the 3 main reasons.
And from NVIDIA, Michael, do you have anything to add there?
No, I think that's the way we think about it too. I mean, we use different words. Maybe the second category, I'd call it more like accuracy. I mean, we can go down a rabbit hole talking about performance and like what do we mean. But I think the ability to customize, to adapt models to a particular domain, that's a really, really important factor. And that's why, internally in NVIDIA, a lot of what we run internally is heavily adapted models, right? And then, yes, price per performance is a big factor, yeah.
Great. And how many of you would say you're in a highly regulated industry in the room? Okay.
A lot of people.
Yeah, majority it seems like, and we're also in California, so there we go. Next question to you, Florian. Are we moving towards an ecosystem of models dominated by a few very large foundational models from large companies, or we're just using their offsprings? Or are we flourishing into a diverse ecosystem around open, closed, specialized, generalized, everything everywhere?
I think it's a very deep question, but I think that when I look at the patterns, and as Meryem pointed out, I think that there is so much benefit today in the ability to build your own specialized smaller model. At least when you build the version 2 of your app, or you try to get more accuracy, that there will be some good benefit of having open weight models and build on top of that, even long term, not just short term, which is one. And second, I actually think that for many of our use cases are of interest to us, which are a lot about text analytics, finding rightful information in documents and so forth. Well, bear with me, a lot of them are actually complex today. Nothing is simple. But down the line, in 2-3 years, models will be better, and potentially there will be some form of a plateau of performance there to some extent. And so you will have a variety of models you can use to do that. And so I actually think that because of that, you'll have a variety of models, specialized or not, you will be using in the enterprise, not just 1 or 2 providers calling the shots, at least for text-based analytics. For building VR or fantasy worlds, I don't know.
Yep. Hence, all of us being gung-ho about the mesh, right? Michael, if you had to simplify, what are the workflows or tooling do you think are essential for differentiated AI?
Well, certainly for Gen AI or for LLMs, there's a whole new ecosystem that we see around LLM ops, and so there are a lot of new tools, but they largely focus on what I'd classify as like the model ops portion of ML ops, right? So how do you, I mean, especially with all of these foundation models that we have, how do you pick a particular foundation model? How do you customize it in some way or adapt it, build a flow around it? It could be RAG, it could be some agentic type of flow, and then how do you wrap that up into an application that you deploy and scale? So that's the general flow that I see across multiple different domains. We work with in a lot of different verticals and a lot of different use cases internally at NVIDIA and also externally. So it's a pretty common flow with different pieces, different solutions. I'd say what's really important is, at least that there's some tool that you're using to evaluate how you're progressing, because I heard this recently. I stole it from someone else, but I think it's brilliant. You don't want to develop your model by vibes. You don't want to just kind of shoot in the dark, and there's a tendency to do that as you're developing AI. It's much better if you have some sort of rigorous approach, and the way that you can do that is by evaluating your results every time. And so if you have a tool that you're using to do that, that's great. We provide something at NVIDIA called the NeMo model eval tool. So you could think of using that, even especially if you're customizing. And then also, especially when you go to production, when you deploy your model or deploy your app, you should consider, how are you deploying it? How are you going to support it in production? So I think those 2 components are especially important.
Yeah, I'm going to ping that back to Florian as well. When we think of this kind of treadmill, AI treadmill that we talked about earlier, where it's become a commodity, people can go buy off the shelf, but to right size that differentiated AI, we're essentially becoming curators. Anything to add in terms of sort of the essence or the essentials as we think of tackling differentiated AI from your perspective?
Yeah, I think that if you fast forward a few years, it's reasonable to imagine that many among you, and including us at Dataiku, will have to build and maintain maybe 1,000, 50, or 100 type of Gen AI type of apps of information extraction or various specialized chatbots in the enterprise. So when you start having this type of portfolio, it's a lot about the complaint factor. And by complaint factor, I mean the number of people in your organization that can complain about it and how strong the complaint can be. And so if you've got 50 chatbots in your organization, the complaint factor is high, probably. Many people will complain at some point. They will be like, it's not the right answer. And maybe it's their fault, your fault, you don't know. And so I think that because of that, long term, the job of us doing analytics, data science, and what else will still be some very basics that are actually true today, which is you need to make sure that you can get properly the data in with terms of data quality in order to build your embeddings. And I have strong workflows there, because whatever the quality of the models, It will always be your job. And you need to have proper evaluation frameworks to have an understanding of the quality, the issues, and your ability to troubleshoot. And so this is true today, as you pointed out, to build strong and robust development environments. But even fast forward 2 or 3 years, that will still be the job in order to deliver quality in the enterprise.
Thank you. Meryem, you wrote on a recent LinkedIn post, and I think it was to your engineers, you said, why do we need more A100s? Everyone wants more A100s, and it is an incredible technology. But there's something to be said about efficiency. Could you expand on what you were talking about there?
Well, I think what I was referring to was my engineers kept asking me for more GPUs, and you guys have sold them all to OpenAI, so can't get any more. And I think what I posted was something like, why do we need so many A100s? Your CV said you were good at maths. But I think what I think about when it comes to GPUs is that we focus a lot on what the headline numbers are for like how expensive these GPUs are per hour, et cetera. And I think the thing that we need to focus on when we're thinking about this LLM deployment, because it does require these really, really expensive and large and powerful GPUs, is that your North Star should be GPU utilization. That it actually doesn't really matter how expensive the like per hour price is. If you're utilizing it properly, then GPUs are so efficient that actually your unit cost of like an actual inference is incredibly, incredibly low. So that's why I like all of the work, well, not all of the work. We have an entire team dedicated to improving GPU utilization. So how can we make our models faster? How can we make models smaller so we can pack more models onto a single GPU? Because if you utilize this resource efficiently, then actually it's a reasonably cheap way of doing compute. So utilization is absolutely everything, and you don't necessarily need thousands of the most expensive GPUs. You just need to use them really, really effectively. Sorry, that was tanked your share price.
No, not at all, actually. And backing up, like we should talk. I can get you some A100s if you want.
Okay,
but
you know where to get them.
You might be surprised, but that's actually, the philosophy internally at NVIDIA, and this is very much led by Jensen, is to be efficient. And much of what we do internally and like what we try to deliver externally is like, how can you get as much as possible out of the hardware, right? Certainly our mission isn't like, let's try to,
scam everyone.
Yes, try to have as inefficient workloads as possible and like use more GPUs. That's not the intention. Intention is how can we get as much as possible? And we have lots of discussions internally about clusters that we have. Like, are we getting the right amount of use in training and in inference? And everything that we learn, we try to bake that into a solution that we also share externally. So it's about democratization of sharing what we learn along the way. But I could definitely see why others may not see it that way, right? Yeah.
I mean, over the sort of past year and a half, when you think of these kinds of costs or budgeting or planning for capacity, what has sort of been your thoughts around that? Are things going to change over the next few years? Will the cost halve? Like, where are we going?
Yeah, really good question, because I don't know. I guess I can only look back and see how things have gone down, like historically, to kind of estimate what the future will bring. And what I see is just this like very rapid rate of advancements in the hardware, in the software. And I can't remember the name of the law. I think it's like Worth's law, or there's some sort of like kind of half-joking law about computer programming, right? That like the more that you make optimizations, the more that you improve the CPU, like memory, storage, et cetera, like programmers are going to figure out how to add more features to slow the program down, right? But the flip, there is some like a sort of half-truth to that, because I think in AI, like we have all these advancements, and yet I feel like overall the rate of adoption of AI and implementation of AI has only increased, right? So I would say that like you'll see like if you're just comparing a kind of apples to apples, like a model that you have today and what you could do in like, a year from now, you'll probably be able to 10x, what you're able to do. But in terms of like how much will you use the compute, what's the overall price that you're paying, like I think it would be equivalent, right? So it depends on the lens that you're looking at it through.
Yeah, I mean, from our point of view, so our company's been around for 3 years, and we've, before that we were in academia, and the level of optimization we're able to do now versus even like 6 months ago or a year ago is probably about an order of magnitude, that we have been able, for the same workload, to run it so much faster because there's so many people trying to make these things more efficient and help you improve that, like constantly, that GPU utilization. And I have no reason to think that the research progress will slow down. That I think from a software and infrastructural point of view, we'll be able to significantly reduce token costs for the same size model. Whether that means we all get way cheaper models or whether we all upgrade to really, really chunky ones, I think it'll depend per use case. But yeah, the future's looking bright.
It's looking bright. Back to Florian. So I joined Dataiku about 15 months ago. You founded the company, co-founded the company, and it's been over 10 years. And the mission to bring quality AI to everyone every day for these large organizations, it's been a seismic change with Gen AI. When you're thinking about that mission and that journey, what are some things that are kind of top of mind for you today as you kind of look at the landscape?
I think that the mission of, we started the company with the mission of democratizing AI, which seems, kind of obvious that there will be some democratization of AI. But from my perspective, at the end of the day, when I say democratize AI, it's not just about like everyone using it, it's also about who is building it. I actually believe that there is some seismic change in the way AI will transform some business processes, the way and the work of everyone, but that in order for that to happen, you actually need to have people that are domain experts today to be part of the change and then participating one way or another in the building of models, in the spec of applications, in everything they can do in order to bring the right data in and so forth, in order to actually accept such change. And that if it's only software engineers trying to encode the life of everyone, it will actually not work, or actually not the way we expect. So long term, we build our product in order to actually have as many people as possible, especially beyond data scientists, to be able to get into data, because that's the future of work for many domain experts today. And I think that it was true back in the day of like the early days of data science, but I think it's still true today with in the world of Gen AI.
Great. Kind of makes me think of, everyone used to make this joke around how many X people do you need to change a light bulb. I think with Gen AI, it's like everyone should be able to take part in changing the light bulb. There we go.
I don't think that analogy quite works.
It doesn't. Okay, we'll work on it. I need feedback after this, okay, everyone? And I think we talked about differentiated AI, and we will go into session around value building and storytelling that value, but also the strategy around getting a return on AI. And so there are real opportunity costs. Catalina talked about it earlier, that the longer you wait, there's going to be opportunity costs, diminishing returns to that blue line that she was talking about. So how do we make Gen AI work for us right now? And how do we balance accuracy with just getting going and learning from it? For each of you, starting with Meryem.
So we did one of these in Chicago a couple weeks ago, and Jed from Dataiku was asked this question, and he said something to the effect of, it's almost irresponsible to not evaluate whether your traditional NLP pipelines can be replaced or augmented with LLMs. And that's like a really easy, very low risk place to start where you're already using NLP and you can almost always improve your accuracy by like 20 points overnight. So like that's a great place to start. And that's, I can't take any credit for that. But when I think about like what I think good use cases are. Good use cases that we see are typically internal use cases, and they are typically in ways that do not represent themselves as a chatbot. And people seem to always go for a chatbot as like the LLM 101, but actually chatbots are incredibly difficult to do well. But if you figure out parts of processes that you can augment using AI and LLMs that are internal, that are fairly low risk, that's what I would start and kind of build that confidence, and then go on to the bigger, meatier ones next. What are you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a lot of hype around Gen AI, certainly, but I think things are also moving just so quickly that I couldn't agree more. Like, if you're not tinkering, or I guess with what Jed said, you know, like if you're not tinkering, if you're not actually trying to use the latest and greatest, and you don't have the kind of you know, forethought that like, okay, this is going to 10x, this is going to 100x like in a very short period of time. Like, yes, this might not be perfect right now, but eventually it'll get there. Then I think that's a mistake, right? Like, I think tinkering is important. I would highlight RAG. I would highlight like knowledge, you know, a sort of like retrieval type of workflow. That's pretty useful right now as it is. And I think there are a lot of workflows that could benefit from that, and couldn't agree more with what you said about like chatbots. And there's a lot that I think people want to do that requires a lot, you know, a lot more built into the app itself, right? But something like RAG, I think, is very doable. Something like using aspects of LLMs as a part of a pipeline for NLP, I think, very here and now, like very applicable. And then this is the worst that things are. Like, it's just going to get much better.
Yeah, I think there is no doubt that in a few years we'll look back at ourselves, the kind of technology we're using today, and we will laugh a bit, like all of the RAG pattern. We're like, wow, we were doing that. Do you remember Pig, the Hadoop language back in the day? Yeah, we loved that back 10 years ago. Yeah, it will be the same. We'll be just laughing at ourselves. But I think that regardless, it's important to actually kickstart today and actually do Gen AI, because there is a lot of learning factor. We see a lot of our customers building those new use cases, but I think it's very important to learn what are the limitations, what you can do or not do, understand what kind of data you would need and that you don't have in order to feed those systems, to understand the security implications, what means information leakage or not in your organization, for instance, like building on those concepts. Because indeed scaling that to the enterprise for every use case and build that in the safe and secure fashion will not happen overnight. But you will have lots of learning involved, and it's better to actually kickstart today, because the constraints you will understand in the first applications will help you a lot to figure that out in a concrete way, not just by looking at slides.
Yeah, thank you. And I think in terms of just getting started versus striving for perfection or accuracy, it's very down to the use cases. So for organizations, when is it bread and butter to have accuracy versus not? And just getting started with, you know, as you said, where is it irresponsible not to apply it? Before we go to Q&A, final questions would be, what's exciting about this space right now? How do you find meaning in your day-to-day? Because this is your life. This is all of our lives right now. It's just Gen AI. And do you have any recommended sort of podcasts or things that you're reading and keeping up to date with?
I mean, it's very difficult to not be so grateful to be in this space at this particular time. I often pinch myself that, you know, when people are like, if you could go back to any period in history and like experience it, people in like, you know, probably just like 10 years will ask to come back here, or 50 or 100 years, because we're really at a very, very exciting time in terms of technological transformation. Yeah, I'm just grateful to be here, and I'm grateful to be part and like contribute to an ecosystem that's moving so quickly and actually like delivering real and genuine value that like will change the way that we as humanity live. So yeah, that's and in terms of, I mean, everyone has to go listen to a Coldplay album, probably.
We'll be done.
Yeah, I find myself agreeing with you. I mean, I think it's we're very lucky. I think it's a very interesting time. I think it's utter chaos at times. I mean, things change on a day-to-day basis. I think in terms of like, where do I find my news? I have to find it everywhere, from, you know, Hacker News, Y Combinator, Twitter, you know, Archive, like all across the board. You kind of have to stay on top of everything, which it could feel overwhelming, but I feel very excited by it. It feels like there's just this vibrant ecosystem of all sorts of people making contributions, and I think that's the best, you know, best place to be, and yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think we're lucky to be in those times. It's I'm back loving reading research papers. Meaning, back 15 or 10 years ago, I was like reading database or ML papers. Lots of things were happening, but I must admit that 5 years ago, I was like, it's always the same thing. Always the same thing. Like, yeah, no one will be XGBoost. Great. But so back now, you actually have interesting things happening. You can, every week, you've got a new thing popping in, a new model, someone with a new ID, and so forth. And it's very easy to get this information by probably subscribing to 1 or 2 people just republishing the right things. So we are living in very lucky days, indeed.
Thank you. I hope you have questions. So would love, just raise your hand. We'll get a mic over to you.
Thank you. I have a question to Florian. Maybe like not in the subject of that, but I remember, let's say 5, 6 years ago, you were making lots of effort targeted at, I would say, like lay people audiences, especially in Europe, with documentary screening and all that. So how would you describe the impact of that? What was the purpose of that? I guess the elevating of data culture overall, and how did you assess that impact now?
I think what we've seen is that lots of organizations change their culture and their ability to harness the right data by providing better tooling to a broader user base and getting to a more self-service analytic capabilities, which is more easily said than done, because especially in regulated industries, you have to measure the impact. But that this change of data culture enable to actually be more efficient for them, and just, I think that actually it prepare them to adopt the next wave, as in AI, in a better way. Because the change of culture is actually harder and slower than the change of technology.
I guess the follow-up question is, do you see the impact of those like efforts from 5, 6 years ago, like that in that area specifically?
Yeah, we've seen the impact in those organizations, their ability to just, for instance, augment the number of data products and their usage. That's for sure.
Thank you so much. Florian, question for you about building agents. So I'm hearing more and more about building agents, agentic AI. I myself actually have an idea to build my own company about agentic AI, maybe in the future, like when I'm 50 years old, gifts for my birthday. But I'd like to hear your perspective, because when we look at the underlying architecture of Dataiku, it's kind of going in that direction with a little bit of orchestration. So what's your take on that? Like, it's all over the place in the media, and it's almost making Gen AI obsolete.
Yeah, I think everything is making everything obsolete every other week these days. So it's every day, so it's hard to follow. And indeed, I also would argue that depending on the context, when you say agent, sometimes you mean chatbot, and sometimes you mean something else. So there is a wide spectrum of capabilities. Indeed, we see ourselves as having the ability to actually add more and more capabilities to our platform in order to better support all of the configurability you will need in order to first build the RAG pattern the right way, expand on it, add more tools, for instance, or you can connect to your existing data, your existing models, because it makes sense that from the Dataiku platform, you can actually build agents that can answer data questions, get into the weeds of things of this. And we also believe that there is lots of value to be able to do it in a visual way, just because more people will need to inspect and understand how those things works over time. That being said, the agent in the essence of it could actually become actually a new way to program, which is wider than the work of any of us, because it could become the norm of like doing everything. And in which case there might, well, building agent in a general sense would be as generic as doing software. So everyone will be doing it, which is very fun. It relates actually to some of your questions that or answers we had related to costs. When you think about the cost of AI today, you think about inference of tokens or building videos, the big question is, will the cost of compute be driven by the number of the time being spent on agents themselves? All of this meta programming, asking the machine to ask the machine to ask the machine to ask the machine, will actually be what will consume compute at the end of the day, which is fascinating, because it would be like, as you pointed out, as Python being used, even if the CPU are better and better, programs are slower.